All right, let's dig into video 5. This is EPUB cleanup with accessibility in mind. I want to pause here and explain the word accessibility when it's spelled like this, in case you haven't seen this before. It's not meant to make you feel dumb. It's just a short form for the word accessibility. So it's A11Y, and 11 stands for the 11 letters that get elided when you make it into a short form. So this, in case you see it in the wild or elsewhere in this series of courses, A11Y really means accessibility without spelling out the gigantic long word with a lot of syllables and double letters, which I always misspell. So it's really a way of mitigating against my typos. Okay, in this video, we are going to talk about we're leaving InDesign behind now, and we're going to dig right into the HTML and the CSS. We're going to open up the EPUB and look at all the parts and talk about what's going on there. Before I dig into that, I just want to say a word about where you edit your ebooks. I like to edit ebooks in Oxygen, and that's really only because that's where I learned how to do it, and that's what I know how to do well. I know how to use that software to do it, and it's easy for me. It looks like how I want it to look, etc. It's really a question of comfort. Oxygen is expensive. I think it's about $300 US, although since I last purchased it, it has gone to a subscription model because capitalism, I guess, they can make more money. You don't need to edit your ebooks in Oxygen if you don't want to, particularly if you're at a small cash-strapped publisher. There are other options. There's a piece of software called Sigil, which I have loaded on this computer. It's right here, and it is free. So it's also an EPUB editor, so it's going to show you the HTML, and it's going to show you. So let me open up a book in here and show you what it looks like. So we'll open up the test EPUB. I always just say yes to this. I don't know what that message means. It's mysterious, but let's look in one of the chapters. So this is how it looks. And if you want, while you're in this window, you can have a preview. That's what I wanted to get to. So when you edit it, it shows up live. So let's take the word chapter out of that title page. And then you see over here, it just disappeared out of that title. So this is a really good, very robust editor, and it's free. So free is always great. Just be cautious that sometimes it inserts things into your book that you don't want. I think that those are the old days. It doesn't really do that anymore, but Sigil is a very good editor. For the purposes of this video though, I'm going to use Oxygen. I hope you don't mind terribly, but I will show you how things look in Oxygen, and with luck, you can manage that. It's just a question of comfort. So you do what you feel is best. It's just a cleaner interface and I just like it more, but it really is just what I'm used to. Okay, here's our ebook and here are all the parts. This meta-inf folder is always top level and it includes only two things inside of it: the container, which you must have or your ebook won't work, and the encryption file. The encryption file is related to the fonts. You can leave that in there. You are actually supposed to leave that in there if you embed fonts, but I'll caution you that your fonts won't work on Kindle if you leave the encryption in. So you do what you want with that information. I'm just going to leave it in for now, but if I were making a Mobi out of this file, if this ebook was going to Amazon, then I would delete that encryption folder. Okay, we'll close that. Here's the CSS. These are the style sheets. Here are the fonts that were in that book. They're all embedded here nicely. And then here are the images. There weren't too many, so just a few. And then here are the other pieces. So the content OPF, I'm going to go into that in depth in a second. The cover, and then InDesign is a little bit flat-footed. It just names these things with the name of the InDesign file. So I had called that file formatted. And then it just iterates it. So these go in order. This is the first, the second, the third, the fourth. Yeah, it's not rocket science how that happens. And then these two documents, the toc.ncx is an EPUB2 navigation file. We don't need that anymore. You don't need the NCX in order for your ebook to validate, but I always just leave it in because there are still the odd EPUB2 readers in the world, especially like European library platforms apparently. And if that NCX isn't in there, then the EPUB will have no navigation to fall back on. So I leave it in there, but I pay no attention to it and I don't clean it up because I resent it. There you go. That's a little insight into how mean I am about EPUB. And then the toc.xhtml is the main navigation document. So this is the document from which these pieces are pulled, the table of contents and the landmarks. Okay, let's go into the content.opf file first, and I will just explain that a little bit. Oh, come on, please open. And I like to look at it as text because that's just how I fly. There's a lot of code-ish things going on here that you don't necessarily need to know all about. This line here irritates me, so I usually take it out. This is just a piece of code that InDesign inserts into every single EPUB that it exports, and you can delete that if you want and nothing bad will happen. I do it just to annoy Adobe. I can't imagine that they feel it, but I do it anyway. So something to note here, there are two language declarations, English US and French. This document is primarily English, so I'm going to delete that French language declaration. The French is there because we had a little snippet of French, which I was very careful to format with a character style, calling it to French, because I want that language shift to be noted in the ebook, but it does not need to be declared here. That's erroneous. That's something that InDesign does badly. So other things. So this is the metadata that's embedded in the ebook, all the way from lines 3 down to line 14. There's the title, the author or creator, the publisher, the date that this was made, January 16th. The copyright statement that I put in, obviously I don't own the copyright to Peter Pan, but this is just a test EPUB. And then the DC terms, this is modified. There are some reading systems that cache your ebooks. So if you're doing testing, for example, iBooks is very bad at that. If you're doing testing and you want to import a new EPUB into Apple Books, and you want it to be seen as new, you can just edit the date modified, and it will see it as new. So that's your hot tip. In general, this would be the space for an ISBN. I don't have an ISBN for this book because it's just a test ebook. So what is this long string here? Don't ever delete this URN:UUID string. It is actually tied to the font encryption. And if you delete that, then the fonts won't work at all. So it's tied directly back to this file and these files. Basically, what happens when InDesign exports embedded fonts, it subsets those fonts. So it creates new versions of those fonts that have just the keystrokes that are present in the InDesign file, in that content, and makes new versions of them. And then it encrypts them using this piece of the puzzle up here, and it's all tied to this long string right here. So don't delete that. If you want to add an ISBN, a proper ISBN, you can do that. And then if you do that, what I recommend is you get an EPUB that you know works and has the correct metadata in it, and you copy it and paste it in here, and then paste your ISBN over top of the one that exists. I'm a big fan of cribbing successful code that works elsewhere. Okay, the other piece here, this is the manifest. This is really, it is exactly what a manifest says. Just like a manifest on a ship lists everyone on board, this manifest lists everything in the EPUB. So the cover, the HTML files, the navigation files, the style sheet, the fonts right there, and then the images. If you add a font or take away a font, then you need to edit it here. If you add an HTML file or take away an HTML file, you need to edit it in this manifest. If this manifest doesn't relate directly to what's over here inside the ebook, you'll get a validation error. The spine is a unique thing in EPUB markup that just lists everything in the ebook and the order in which it appears. The cover has a linear equals no because we don't want the cover to display within the ebook in general. If you do want it to display, you can change that to yes, or you can just delete it altogether and it will display. I don't feel strongly about covers in the ebooks one way or the other, so whatever you think is fine. If you delete an HTML file or add an HTML file, then you from up here, then you need to edit it down here. And then finally, the guide is the last piece. This points to both the cover and the start of content. So it says text, and then here's title equals beginning, and that just means that's where that file will open. Okay, to edit this for with accessibility in mind, there are a couple of things. So there's a couple of things I need to point out that InDesign doesn't do well. I'm going to close this OPF file, and I'm going to open the first piece of. Hi, Rubes. My dog came for a visit, just in case you were wondering. Okay, so here's chapter 1. There's a lot going on here. I hope this doesn't burn your eyes if this is the first time you're looking at live HTML. For reasons that are mysterious to me, InDesign has exported a language declaration for every single piece of HTML. That is a mistake, and we will be deleting it. It also erroneously said that most of this document is in French, which is also a mistake, so we will be deleting that. So those language declarations need to go. And I will do that by just blasting it. Now, just so you know, if you wanted to make sure, let's look in chapter 2 HTML and see if it's similar. It's not. So it just has the English US up here and not everywhere else in the document. So that's really interesting. InDesign does mysterious things sometimes, not necessarily logical. Okay, so the language declaration is on the body tag, and that is a fundamental misunderstanding of HTML. That's InDesign for you. This language declaration actually needs to be up here on the root HTML element. So you just copy and paste that up there and you're golden. So I'm going to do that in this file as well. And then I'm going to check on my little snippet of French to make sure that it came out properly. There it is. Span class equals French, and there it has that. It also has this right here. So, arg, sorry about that. Okay, so let's look at this tag. This is the sentence that's in French, and it's marked up as a language shift grand. That sentence was cleanly formatted, but nonetheless, InDesign gave me a character level override. InDesign is famous at this and very bad at it, and this is something that you need to clean up. So here's what I recommend. I'm going to cut that, save that file, and close it. And then this is something that Oxygen is capable of. So far as I know, Sigil isn't, but I'll show you how to do a broad global find and replace. So with the OEBPS selected, I'm going to go down to find and replace in files. So that's going to find this string in everything in the document, and it's going to replace it with nothing. The problem is that this is the third override, so there's a 1 and a 2 as well. In order to get this global search to find everything in the document, instead of asking it to look like look for an IDGen character override -3, I'm going to say look for that string, but instead of a 3, look for any digit and replace it with nothing. So this piece, this little thing here, this \d, is it? Who told you to do that? Let's go back. I just made a little bit of a press something too quickly. This is a regular expression. Regular expressions are very handy when you're cleaning up ebooks. So if you don't know them already, I encourage you to get comfortable with them. And in the resources for this video, I'll link to a couple of tutorials around regex so you can figure out how to use it a little better. I'm going to show you some specific regex strings in this video, and I'm also going to give them to you so that you can just use those over and over again. This is one that I strongly recommend that you do. So I'm going to replace all. It's going to look, and so there were 10 instances in this book. So that got rid of the character level formatting problems, but I think that we probably also have some paragraph and object style overrides as well. So here's the table override. Here's there's lots of overrides. There's some cell overrides. There's some color inherit overrides. There's lots going on here, so lots to clean up. So I know there's only one table in this document, so I can just search for this and blast it out in here. So basically what I want you to do is to clean up all the overrides in a document. I don't want any of them in anything that I do in here. So InDesign is famously terrible at that. And then other things that we're going to edit. So other things that we're going to do, the title element is also populated with the name of the file, which is not necessarily meaningful. That title element needs to be changed to something more meaningful, like chapter 1. Let's go into the rest of the HTML and do all of them at the same time. Okay, so formatted 3, I believe this is chapter 2. Chapter 1, cover is fine. This is the title page. And this is the frontispiece. That needs to be done in every single HTML file. Okay, great. So we've cleaned up the language declarations. We've cleaned up the overrides. The next piece is to clean up the navigation. So let's open the toc.shtml and have a look. So these are the page stakes that we put in. We're going to get rid of these numbers at the beginning of those chapters. So that clears that up. This is the TOC right here. This is the landmarks right here. We're going to later create the page list, and we're going to add some corollary ARIA roles as well. So the EPUB type semantics are here, and we're going to map that to some ARIA roles as well. I'm going to leave that for right now, and I'm going to go back to the chapter 2, and I'm going to show you how to clean up the page stakes. So here, InDesign just goes a little bit bonkers. So it's put in a span for the page stake, and then it's put in an anchor, and then it's closed that span, and then it's opened a span for the page stake that's right here, so page 5. So basically this is erroneous, and I'm going to delete it. The very nice thing about Oxygen, particularly over Sigil, is that when I delete the opening tag, the end tag right here will delete automatically as well. So I don't know if you saw that, but there's no closing span tag there anymore. So this is the span for the page stake, and it's actually live in the ebook right now. So if we look in the ebook, let's go in here and migrate to chapter 1. I don't know what's happening. I've got some validation errors, so it's not working. But this 5 is live on the page, and we don't want that. Okay, let's go back to that Word file. So down here is and this is something you're going to get along with the video, is the code to fix the page stakes. So I'm going to copy this, and I'll explain what this is in a second. And I'm going to go over and do a global. So on all of the HTML files. Paste that in here. So basically what I'm doing is looking for that string, and then this piece in here is the regex. So an open bracket \d, so we're looking for a digit. This plus sign means that we're looking for it 1 or more times. And then this question mark is a don't be greedy instruction. So it's saying look for it for 1 or more times, but don't grab too much text. That's essentially what that says. We'll go back to this Word file and copy the second string. Okay, so this is turning this span into the correct span for marking the page breaks. So we're saying this is a page break, EPUB type equals page break. This is the ARIA role that maps along to that page break. So this is the more correct semantics. We're going to leave them both in there. EPUB type isn't going to break anywhere, but isn't necessarily meaningful. This piece, the ARIA role, is much more meaningful, so we're going to include that. The ID equals page $1. What the heck does that mean? So that means this $1 means the found text in the first string. So that means that it's looking for everything inside the brackets up here. Oh, fart, what did I just do? Oh, goodness gracious. Yeah, there you go. Okay. So it's looking for the digit one or more times. Don't be greedy, and it's placing it here. If you're using Sigil to do this, then what you need to do is, I will include that code in the Word file that I send out with this, but Sigil's regex engine operates just a little differently, and you need to do a \1 instead of a $1. Okay, I'm gonna say replace all, and it will tell me how many pages. So it found that 27 times. Why is it giving me an error? That's very curious. I'll figure that out later. I was told recently that I need to have spaces around that, but I think that that's what's throwing the error. I'm actually not sure. Yeah, it doesn't like those spaces. So in which case we can just undo that and do that search again without spaces. There, so that will do it correctly. Oh, except I did it only in one file. Oh, brother. Doesn't matter. So that's the correct page break. This is exactly how we want it to look. And because this is code, this means that those page breaks, like page 11 is going to be marked underneath the hood. It's not going to be live in the copy. So it won't show up. This number 5 isn't going to show up next to chapter 1 anymore. It's going to be invisible. It's going to be under the hood, so to speak. Okay, so then let's do the work of creating the page list. Over here is the navigation document. I have some saved code that I use all the time that I have opened in BB Edit. Haha, there it is. It just came up. So this is some various things. This is, I'm also happy to share this. This is stuff that I have saved everywhere and that I use when I'm making books. I always edit the cover code. So I change it a little bit. This is alt text from a different cover, but that's okay. I use this all the time. So I have the correct semantics in here, the ARIA role and the EPUB role, the class equals cover, and then I have some CSS that I put in the CSS file to make that work accurately. What's going on here is that we have the height set to 95 vertical height units. And that means that the cover is always going to constrain itself to the page, which is perfect and what we want. Other things down here are things like the page list. This is something that we're going to create in a second. And I have this code just ready to go here. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to bring it over here. So I pasted that in and it immediately threw an error. And the reason it threw an error is because that nav isn't closed. So I've closed it and the error goes away, but now I need to do the work of creating the list that goes inside the page list. So I do not have a sample of the page list over here, but essentially what we want to do is to list out those 27 pages, very similar to how we're doing it up here. So let me show you how I do that. I'm going to copy that, I'm going to put it down here, and then I'm going to take this out. And I'm I'm going to show you what we're going to do in a second. So I'm going to point it to the very first HTML. This is the cover. Oh, this is the frontispiece. And this one doesn't have an actual thing in it because it didn't have any text. So here we go. We're going to put this in here and we're going to say 1, 1. Okay, done. And then we're going to go back over to the toc.html and we're going to say page 1. So the very first HTML file, formatted.xhtml, has page 1 in it. We'll put that there. And then I'm going to copy that, paste it. I always put a line space in between just so that I know what's going on. We're going to point it to the next HTML file. This is tedious, especially if there's a long book. I'm working on scripting this, but for now it's not scripted. So let's fix the spacing issues and then create. Okay. This has a small tag on it for reasons unknown. There we go. Okay, so page 3 and 4 are in formatted -1. The page 2 is blank. I don't know if you'll remember that, but so page 3. And page 4. And then formatted 2 is the big one. So this one starts at page 5 and ends at page 18. Yeah, so 5 to 18. So let's go back over here. I'm going to make this formatted 2. I'm going to remove this and then paste that. So that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So this is super tedious, as you can see. And would get really tiresome with a long book. This is a short book, so we can deal, but this is something that I hope to have a really good scripting solution to soon. And with luck, I will get that and I will share it with you immediately. Watch my Twitter. This is what happens when you do things by hand, is you make stupid mistakes. I don't know if you saw that. Pretend you didn't, okay? Oh, another mistake. What a shocker. So you get the idea. This is what you need to do to create the page list. And we'll need to do that for the very last HTML file as well, which goes from page 19 through to 29, I think. Oh, no, it goes to page 30. So I will do that off screen and then validate this for you and show it to you later. But this is essentially how you create the page list. Okay, I am aware that I still need to fix the spacing issues here, and I will do that as well off screen. Too tedious to watch for sure. Okay, other things that we want to do is to add some ARIA role semantics in here. So EPUB type equals TOC. And where do we find those ARIA role semantics? Let me show you. Let's go to the DAISY knowledge base. Go down here. The DAISY knowledge base is the best resource for best practices around both EPUB and accessible EPUB. It is written by people who write standards for a living, so it can be a little bit hard to digest because, well, I don't know. I don't think they're very good at explaining things. They're very good at using precise language. That doesn't necessarily mean it's human language. But if accessibility is something you want to take seriously, then you're going to spend a lot of time on this DAISY Accessible Publishing Knowledge Base. It is an excellent resource. So I navigated to the DPUB ARIA, or Digital Publishing Rules page, and this shows all of the roles that we're going to want to put into our document. So the very first one is this doc TOC. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to go over here and add a corollary ARIA role. So role equals, here we go. And then this one already has the role of doc Pagelist. Landmarks is a funny one, and there is no corollary role. This happens every now and then. It's just one that doesn't have a corollary role. So the toc.xhtml is done, except that I want to migrate the title to something more meaningful like navigation. Okay, and then up here, EPUB type equals chapter. Let's go over here and see doc chapter. I'm going to then do that again. Role equals quote mark doc chapter. Oxygen is smart about putting the close quote mark in automatically, just so you're aware in case you didn't see what happened there. So that's that. I want to add that maybe to, is that in 2? That's in 2. I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm very good at introducing typos to things. And so instead of retyping, I try to crib, and that's why I have that. That's why I have that accessibility code list that I just cribbed from, and that's why I did that there. This piece here, class equals basic text frame, that's something that InDesign put in. It's meaningless, and I'm going to take it out. Okay, I think that's it in terms of ARIA roles for this document. I can't think of anything else. Yeah, footnotes. There's one endnote or footnote. So we will pay attention to that in a minute. Let's just grab that and then hide that. Okay, so we're in chapter 2. We want to go to chapter 1. The footnote will be down at the bottom. And it's right here. So here's the EPUB type equals footnote. I'm going to add role equals doc footnote. Great. I'm also going to just get rid of this color inheriting because that's dumb and it's a waste. It's duplicated. This is the image that I actually want to go at the start of chapter 2. So I'm going to take that out now and put it at the start of chapter 2. And so you can see that this is how, God, InDesign just creates the most verbose HTML. It's aggravating. This small tag is unnecessary. I don't know if you can see this, but I try to delete as much as I can in terms of overly verbose HTML. So there, the fig caption has to come inside the closed figure tag, so I've done that. That's all there. This is an extra piece of code that can go, just like at the start of chapter 2, it was there. I'm going to fix this right now. I'm going to say, so find this string with 2 figures and replace it with, and then here I'm going to edit the spaces and I'm going to say $1. That should fix it. That did it. Great. Okay. Other thing I want to fix is the image that I want at the start of chapter 1 is in here. And that's not where I want it. So it's right there. So I'm going to cut that. And I'm going to put it at the start of chapter 1. Just like I just did for chapter 2. And I'm going to, so I remember I styled that caption with the fig caption and I exported it to there. So I've done the best I can in terms of getting good HTML out of InDesign. Unfortunately, InDesign is not intuitive and doesn't understand that that fig caption has to be inside of the closed figure tag. So we'll put that there now. Now, when I moved this image, I moved a page number. So page 4 is now in number 2. So I'm going to go back over to this page list down here and put it in formatted 2. So it's in the correct HTML file. Okay. Okay. Other things that we need to do are we need to clean the CSS and we need to put in some accessibility metadata. Let's go back to this Word file. Here's the accessibility metadata. What I suggest is that you copy and paste this into your ebooks. I'm going to copy that and I'm going to go over here to the content.opf and I'm going to put it at the bottom of the metadata. And I'm going to put a little space in there so we can see it a little bit more easily. So the DC source, this is where the source ISBN goes. So that means that this book has its own ebook ISBN in theory. And the print version of this very same book also has its own ISBN, and that would go in that DC source line. If you are a publisher who's certified by Benetech, then you can include these pieces of code. If you're not a publisher who's certified by Benetech, you cannot use that piece of code, so we'll just delete it. The meta property equals accessibility summary, this piece here. This is just a small statement. I'm going to make this so that we can see it all on the page. That just talks about what's going on in this book and how it meets or exceeds web content accessibility guidelines, or WCAG, which is often how that's pronounced. This is a simple book with a few images, which is defined with accessible structural markup. Sounds really scary, right? That just means that we have headers and we have a navigation. The book contains various accessibility features such as alternative text for images, a table of contents, a page list, landmarks, reading order, and semantic structure. So, and it conforms to right here, WCAG AA. This is a very fancy way of saying that it meets basic accessibility guidelines. And then these pieces of metadata here, there are very good explainers over on the DAISY knowledge base. It's a little bit out of scope to explain all this here, but I will just say that access mode textual and visual means that you can read it or you can look at it. Access mode sufficient is textual and visual. And it's you can get everything in this content purely through the text. So accessibility features is that it has print page numbers, it has structural navigation, it has alternative text. It has ARIA roles in it and various ARIA things happening on, so we can point to that here. Other accessibility features, it has display transformability, and that means that the end user or the reader can increase and decrease the font size so that it's acceptable for low vision readers. It has reading order, a table of contents, it has no flashing hazards or sound hazards, and it definitely has no motion simulation hazards. Boy, would I love to see an ebook with motion simulation. Accessibility metadata is, at this point in time, mostly aspirational. I can show you some accessibility metadata in action if you like, if I can get Chrome to pop up. Okay, let's go to title source. Oh, that's not where I want to go. Okay, Vital Source is it's an ebook store that's aimed at higher ed, and it is at present one of the only retailers that's exposing accessibility metadata. So let's look at this. This is a House of Anansi book that I worked on. It gives all the ISBNs, etc. Tells a few things about it. Down here is the description. The table of contents is here. And then under the accessibility tab is where the accessibility metadata is exposed to the consumer. So if you are a print disabled reader who needs to understand which accessibility standards this hits, then Vital Source is a good place to see that. I'm told that Kobo is going to be exposing the accessibility metadata soon, and I hope that more and more ebook retailers follow suit. But for now, this is mostly aspirational outside of Vital Source and another American bookstore called Red Shelf. Nonetheless, use it. Use it in every book that you produce. You're putting in the effort to make this accessible and to meet WCAG AA standards. So use accessibility metadata and cross your fingers that it becomes meaningful in the near future. Okay, so this is mostly cleaned up now. The very last piece of the puzzle is the CSS. So here's the CSS file. This has a lot going on. InDesign, you will be shocked to hear, does not do CSS super well. So we have to work with something that's a little bit fundamentally broken. For now, I am going to go over to this file, and I'm going to copy these pieces of CSS and plop them in. Put them on top of that. There we go. So this basically says don't hyphenate anything. The bald fact of the matter is that there are not good hyphenation dictionaries built into any reading systems at the moment. So allowing things to hyphenate means you're going to get bad breaks. I do need to fix the cover HTML, which I will do soon, but for now, this is already in there. Other things that we need to fix. I'm going to zoom past the table stuff and go right down here. Okay, H2 of A head. This piece of code, EPUB-:none, is one that I don't want in this file. So I'm going to nuclear bomb it out of my CSS. There were 4 matches. I want to go to the base body style. Here it is, right here. This is the base body style right here. It's got a lot going on. InDesign exports all of the, InDesign exports way too much information here, basically. So I don't want this EPUB text align last left. I'm going to also delete that and copy and paste it and delete it right out of there. Let's go back to body. Okay, here's a troublesome thing from an accessibility point of view. It has a color declaration of, this is the hex code for black, basically. 6 zeros equals black. 6 lowercase f's equals white. Hex codes there's lots of them all over the internet. You can just Google hex color codes and you'll find a whole bunch of information about that. But basically, because the body type is declared as black, what that means is that in some reading systems, when the user switches to night mode, all of the body text will disappear. So we never want those kinds of color declarations. I'm going to delete that right now. I actually think I grabbed that wrong. So I like this to be clean. So I put my cursor at the start of the line and then do an arrow down. So it's grabbing the return as well, because I'm really uptight like that. So that found 8 matches. Okay, let's go back to the body type. Here we go. So this one also has a font size declaration of 0.958M, kind of an absurd number. It is thankfully in M's instead of pixels, so that's something to be said. But the fact of the matter is we do not want base body size font size declarations, because it may, in some reading systems, get in the way of upsizing the font. And that is definitely something we don't want. That will get clear in the way of accessibility for someone who has low vision. So I'm going to look for all of those font size declarations at that size and replace them with nothing. Okay, let's go back up to body. Here we go. So what this is saying is that the font is minion, the font style is normal, the font variant is normal, and the font weight is normal. This is the leading, 1.391. Again, a bit of an absurd number, and you can migrate that to something that makes a little bit more sense, like 1.4. This is not a pixel declaration, it is a relative declaration. That just means, it means essentially that the leading will be 140% of the base body size. Maybe more information than you needed, but there you go. So this is an example of something that's overly verbose. Uh, Margin bottom, margin left, margin right, margin top is 0. The much simpler way of declaring that is that the margin is 0. Orphans and widows in the CSS is also aspirational text, aspirational CSS at this point, and it's something we can easily get rid of. So let's get rid of that widows one as well. Okay, page break before auto and page break after auto is also a waste of time in the CSS. So in the interest of getting this as clean as possible, I'm going to get rid of it. Text decoration of none is absurd to have in the CSS, so we're also going to nuclear bomb that out of existence, in addition to text transform of none. Okay, gone. The other thing I want to clean up in here is I want to get rid of this. This is from our page sticks. We don't need it anymore. And then I want to get rid of, right down here, all of these overrides, which we cleaned up. So when you're cleaning this up, make sure you grab the open bracket here, the open curly bracket and the closed curly bracket. If you miss one of those, you're going to have validation errors. So those are all cleaned up and gone. Hooray. Other things that we can clean up in here, like we can search for this margin, these 4 lines of margin definitions and change them to a margin of 0. That is not untoward. The cleaner, the better, the simpler, the better. This is just basic and something that can carry through into lots of areas of your life. This is another thing that I would want to fix. Margin top on the no indent thing of 16 pixels. In general, I'm extremely leery of anything that defines in pixels. I want this to be in percentages. I want it to be relative. So a margin top of 16 pixels, I'm going to migrate to a margin of 1em. So that means that, and 1em will be relative to the text size, but that's basically how we want to do it. So here's another place where the chapter title has 64 pixels after it. I think that's in multiples of 12. So I'm going to do some math and round that out to a margin bottom of 5em. And then I'm just going to get rid of these 3 lines because why not? Page break before auto and always, I'm going to get rid of that because those are always on. We've set the chapter number to break it, so it's always starting on a new page no matter what. Here's something to pay close attention to: line height of 0.8. So that means the leading or the line height is going to be 80%, and that means that in some circumstances it's going to smash, particularly against the top of the page. So I'm going to change that to 1.4. Okay, so that's the basics of cleaning this up. There's the text indent of 18 pixels. I'm actually going to search for this because it may be more than one place. And migrate that to 1.5em. In digital, a small indent on a paragraph can get lost. So this is a text indent of 1.5em is actually larger than I would use in print, but makes more sense on screens. So just a hot tip. I think there was only one of those anyway, but was worth checking. So there's some basics. And now what we need to do is to validate and have a look at all of these changes we made and to make sure they work. The validation is the next video, so I'm going to stop there, but that's some basics of cleaning up. There's a lot of cleanup that you have to do, and the more complex your EPUB, the more cleanup you'll have to do, but this is going to set you up for success, what you've learned just now.